Happy Tuesday and welcome to Raquel's Modern Life. This is your host, Raquel Williams. This is part 2 of my America's Next Top Model story. In part 1, I detailed how I auditioned 5 separate times before finally becoming a semifinalist in 2015. Where we left off, I was on the plane heading to LAX to begin filming for the show. If you haven't listened to part 1, go ahead and do so, and then come meet us here. So the first thing they did when I checked in was take away my phone, which I knew was going to happen. So I brought a notebook and I journaled every day that I was there. I don't have that journal with me, and in fact, I have not looked at it since. So it's in my storage unit in Vegas right now, so I definitely have to go back and get that and read some of it to you because I'm sure it's quite interesting. But this is all just going to be what I remember. And so it might have some inconsistencies. But basically, I had my own hotel room. I feel like it was some type of Hilton in LA. And then we met with the casting directors and they had to go through everything in our wardrobe. And it was like, don't wear anything with logos, don't wear anything with a very distinct brand. All of my stuff was good because I am such a stickler for the rules. I think during this time, Hadassah and Lacey were in my group of people going through wardrobe. The first time I met all of the girls, we were in this room together and they gave us 2 different tests. And one was an IQ test and the other one was a mental wellness test. So that was my first time seeing the other girls and kind of getting a sense of them. And I'm not going to lie, I felt confident about it. I did we were all sitting down, but I did kind of notice I was one of the taller ones, but I didn't really think too much of it. And then we did our tests, and then I think it was the next day or later the same day, we met with 2 different psychologists to go over our scores, basically. And I had always heard about this psychological test in reality TV shows, and I thought, oh no, they're trying to test if you're crazy or not. And what if I'm too crazy to be on reality TV? Yeah, that's not the case. They want you to be. I mean, maybe that's a bold statement, but I really don't think someone being too crazy is going to disqualify them. So anyway, they would talk to us about, oh, you answered this question this way, you answered this question that way. What are things that might trigger you when you're on the show? And I thought that they were asking this to minimize those triggers and make sure we had a good time. Oh no, absolutely not. They were asking in order to manipulate and exploit those triggers, as they really, really tried to do during my time on the show. Also, the IQ test, the psychologist who talked to me about that said, it's very rare we have a IQ this high on this show, which is low-key fucked up. And she told me that I was smart enough to be whatever I wanted in life and that I should be a doctor. And I'm like, well, if I'm going to be whatever I want in life, I want to be a model. Putting this big brain to work. So that was an interesting experience. And I was like, ooh, wow, I really passed this IQ test. This is definitely what they want on this show. And then for the psychological portion of the test, they were like, you really have some deep wounds here, but you seem very happy. And I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, what else am I supposed to do? I'm trying to get picked to be America's Next Top Model, god damn it. I thought that they were just making an observation, but we'll see. So we did that. Most of the time I was there, I was in my hotel room, and we were pretty much confined to our hotel room for about a week with things like this, like the IQ test, the psychological test, the outfit thing. There were other little things where the producers would come bring us to meet with some other producers, and we would talk about things or go over some details, or they would get some information. I would say 90% of the time I was just in my hotel room with no phone, a notebook, and cable TV. And I watched 3 shows pretty much just bounced between them. It was the Cleveland Show, Family Feud, and Married at First Sight. I hadn't heard of that show until this moment, which obviously it's still going to this day, I believe. But yeah, at that time, that was my exposure to it. So I was on reality TV while watching reality TV. So then finally, it comes time to film. And all the girls are in this like holding area, and we're eating food, and we're allowed to like order what we want. And I ordered a bagel with lox because I wanted to, be fancy. We're about to, get on our tour bus and go meet the guys and be on camera. And I all of a sudden feel really sick. And I'm like, okay, I have to go to the bathroom. And they're like, yeah, go for it. And I throw open the bathroom stall door and like projectile vomit onto the toilet. I've never done that in my entire life before or since. But yeah, it was gross. And and I didn't feel nervous, but I must have been, right? Like that's not normal behavior. And then I told one of the producers, like, hey, I don't think it was the food or anything. I'm not sure, but like I just projectile vomited. And they were like, yeah, we always get one. Huh? Like, I get that, but I'm not the one. What do you mean? It's like the psychologist said I was, outwardly chill with inner turmoil. So I guess I was stressed and didn't even know it. But anyway, fun fact. By the way, most of my fun facts are going to be disgusting. So sorry if you're squeamish. That's probably the worst one for this episode, though. All right, moving on. So we get onto this tour bus. And at this point now we're filming. And so we're all kind of like meeting each other, talking to each other. I'm like trying to be in the shot. Like every frame, I'm like, let me in there. I'm like really inserting myself. And I'm very introverted in real life, but I was like trying to talk to everyone, like trying to really put my face out there. So we were in this building, and then they sent us out like as a big group, and we look, and there's like this tour bus full of guys. And we're all like, oh my God, there's guys. Like, we don't know that this is going to happen. And Yusai is at the bottom of the tour bus, and he's like, okay, I'm going to call your name. You're going to run on up. So he calls all of our names. We run into the tour bus. The guys are all there. They're excited to see us. It was funny. It was like, you could tell everyone was instantly in that mode of like trying to talk to everyone, trying to make friends, trying to get their face seen. And they had us changing into swimsuits. I don't remember where. And we did our photo shoot on the top of the bus with Yusai. We rolled up to Hollywood Boulevard, and they're like, okay, you're going to do a runway show in front of all these people. And from the top of the tour bus, I actually like recognized some former ANTM alum in the crowd. So there was this guy on the bus, and we were both reading books. They were both like sci-fi sequels. So I was like, oh, cool, we're both reading books. Like, such an innocuous connection. And I guess the producers really ran with that because they ended up pairing us up for this runway show. So we're waiting to go on, and he's like, oh, do you want me to dip you at the end? I think they want like a little something different. And I'm kind of like, yeah, sure. Like, I'm in an agreeable mood. I'm excited. I'm like, yeah, why the hell not, So we go on, and like people are suddenly like on the stage in our face with signs. And at first I'm kind of like smiling. I'm like, what's happening? And then I'm like, oh, we're supposed to like not react to this. So we keep walking, whatever. We get to the end. He dips me. And then he like leans in for what to me felt like he was leaning in for a kiss. And my head just like backed away so fast. And that part made it onto the episode. Yeah. Low-key embarrassing. I don't know for who, but they did not like that dip. They were calling it like Kelly Catrone and Miss J were like, who is tango dancing out there? So yeah. And then I was also immediately pulled aside after the runway show, and they were like, Raquel, what did you think? What do you think the judges thought of your runway show? And I was like, I think they liked it. Like, what am I supposed to say? I couldn't hear what they were saying, so I was just like, yeah, why wouldn't they? But then because they asked me that question, I kind of got in my head about it. So when I actually saw the episode, I'm like, yeah, that checks out. Then we changed into like our meeting the judges outfit, and we were all in this holding area for a while. And if you've seen the episode, you know that drama with like the crown breaking. I was right there on the couch when that happened. The thing about the fake boobs. In the episode, it looks like I'm just walking away, like I don't want to be involved. But I was yelling at him. I was like, "Oh my god!" And when she was crying, I actually was coming over to comfort her. I think in that moment, when it looks like I'm just walking away with my eyes all big. Um, but yeah, we were not having it. And then someone was like, "Oh, let's all show our best runway walk." So we were all doing that, and then we were going around in a circle saying, like, "Who do you think is your biggest competition?" And a few people said me. Everyone's like, "Oh, your walk is really good," which is funny because I feel like my walk wasn't that good at that point. It got better later. But I thought it was good. Maybe I had the confidence. And then that is when Stefano, insulted Alexa's boob job. And then we were all the girls were like, "Oh," like really rushed to her defense. That was, I think what I didn't realize at that time and what I realize now that I watch more reality TV, let's be honest, the people who are the most antagonistic are going to make it further. Like that's just the way that it is. All of that was wild. And then we went back one at a time to talk to the judges. I was last. Like by the time I was going back there, it was 11 p.m. And the judges for this season were, of course, Tyra Banks, Miss J, Kelly Catrone, and Yusai. Tyra is just as beautiful in real life, just so you know. She did come out to talk to us during our first runway show. And yeah, just a very stunning person. And then Kelly, I was actually the most nervous about because they call her Cutthroat Catrone because if she's not into you, like, she's not nice about it. But she actually liked me. And so that whole thing where I came out and like waved my Harry Potter wand, the producers told me to do that. I mean, I did mention that I liked Harry Potter, and in my casting video I'm like running around with my Harry Potter wand, but they're like, "Oh yeah, we love it, bring that, like do that." Yeah. So anyway, I did that. They were just kind of blinking at me. But Kelly was like, "Oh, we could use another Wiccan on this show." And in my head, I'm like, Wiccan? But then I'm just like, yeah, totally. And up until this point, I was pretty confident. But there is a camera in the corner with a blinking light. And I'm not, I think I'm type B with like type A anxiety. So before I had gone on this show, I'd looked up, oh, how many people watched, the first episode of last season of America's Next Top Model? And it was 1 million. So I'm looking at that camera in the corner as if there are 1 million eyes on me. And I'm like, fuck this. So, I'm talking a little bit about myself and sharing some opinions that I have, whatever. And I think during one of my calls with the casting director prior to being on the show, I told them that when I was 18 years old in Vegas trying to become a model, I applied on Craigslist to what I thought was a modeling position, and it was actually an escort position. And then, had this very awkward phone call. And so they were like, "Oh, so tell us about some of the like things that happened to you early on in your modeling career that were very scary." And they really tried to get me to talk about that. And to me, I'm like, one phone call is not very scary. It's like a funny anecdote and like a little creepy, but it's not a sob story that I would want to share to 1 million people. I don't know. I just was kind of like brushed it off. I was like, "Oh, no, nothing bad happened to me." I guess if I was really playing the game, I could have been like, "Yes, this is bad and it happens to so many girls." And like, I don't know. I guess that would have been fine. But I was just kind of like, "Oh, that, no, like, who cares?" And yeah, Tyra was not impressed with me at all. Yusai didn't really seem to like me either. When he pulled up my picture, though, everyone was like, "It's good." But like in that way, that was kind of like, whatever, like it's good, it's fine. They had really no feedback to give me, and that I think for me was my biggest like red flag moment where I was like, oh, I don't know if this is gonna go my way, because I feel like if they really wanted me on the show, they would have gave us more content, like, oh, this is good, this is bad, this is what we want to see you improve on. But they were just kind of like, it's good. But in the moment, I was like, oh yay. And then Miss J was like, oh, gorgeous. Miss J really was into me. It was cool. But anyway, so I go home and I'm feeling confident and I go to sleep. And the next day we're filming again. And once again, they have, I believe it's all the girls in the tour bus this time. Maybe it was mingled at this point. But the thing is, we weren't allowed to talk to each other unless the cameras were on. After like initially meeting each other, I don't remember how strict they were about this. We're driving to this house like up in the hills and we roll up and it's gorgeous. I remember even in the moment feeling very metaphorical and I was like, I feel like a snake about to strike. Like every muscle in me is tensed and I'm just like waiting. And at this point, the bad feeling had set in. The night before, I was kind of like, oh yeah, they're always miking me. They're always asking me my opinion. They had me go last. Like I'm clearly something special. By this point, I was like, I don't feel good about this. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to still try to be optimistic. And I remember Hadassah actually looked at me and was like, are you okay? And I was like, I'm worried. And she was like, oh, you don't have anything to worry about. Like, obviously they're going to pick you. And in my head, I'm like, I was like, okay, well, that puts me at ease a bit. But I was like, I don't think that's true. But it was nice to hear, at least like she thought so. So anyway, we, get out and they have us line up around this like pool essentially. And there's this bubble machine just like dripping water and soap. And the way they have us lined up, like I'm basically standing under it. And everyone's dressed all cute because we know it's like elimination day. And the property brothers come out and are like, this is our house. I didn't know who they were actually at this point, but everyone was super excited and I was like, oh my God. So anyway, they have us lined up around this pool and I'm basically standing in the water bubble stream and my hair is just getting absolutely wrecked. And I'm like, I don't even care how bad I look because I'm going to be on this show. Like, it doesn't even matter right now. I just like I had this like burst of confidence at the last minute, especially because they were like, oh, we want to get you mic'd up. Like I was one of the only people that they mic'd up immediately with the waterproof mics because we all had our regular mics, but they had to take everyone's off and then gave certain people waterproof ones. And I was like the first one that they got mic'd. So I was like, oh yeah, hell yeah, let's go. So they were like, oh, we have all these beach balls in here. And if you see your name on a beach ball, that means you made it to the next level. So I'm running through these beach balls. I'm looking at them. I'm like, oh, hey, like, Lacey, here's your ball. Whoever, here's your ball. And I'm just like punting people's balls to them, watching them look so excited. And then I'm going through and I'm like, wait, like, I don't have one. Like, I'm looking through them and I'm realizing like there just isn't one with my name on it. And you can see in the episode, like the moment I realize it. And yeah, so I was just like, well, damn, my instincts were right. And I just felt like shitty, especially because I was the only one who was completely drenched. I look like Samara from The Ring after she crawls out of the well. It was bad, you guys. There was like this period of time where we were waiting for the official announcement. They're like getting everyone into position. And, Miss J and Usai are standing there. Miss J is just like shaking her head and being like, I don't get this. Like looking around at all the people getting eliminated, it's like, I don't get that. I don't get that. He looks me dead in the eyes and says, I don't get that. Like not to throw them under the bus, but she also said, this is why I quit. And so like that at least made me feel good. And before the cameras started rolling and like everything was official, he looked at all of us and said like, do not take this seriously. Like please don't take this seriously. Anyway, then the cameras are rolling and they're like, I'm so sorry, but your journey here is over and time to go. And we're like, okay, bye. And we give them hugs. And then as soon as my foot is out of that pool, camera people are in my face saying, Raquel, like, is this going to be the end of your modeling career? And and I went the fuck off on them. I was like, no, this isn't going to be the end of my modeling career. I gave up an opportunity to go model in Japan because of this show. And so, no, I was a model before this and I'll be a model after this. This has no bearing on my life. It's not like I'm conceited or anything, but this just doesn't feel right to me. Just feels like they kind of, knew that this was going to happen. And the one part that they put on the show was me saying, I'm not conceited, but this just doesn't feel right to me. And the thing is, it wasn't just me. Every single person that got eliminated on that first day was a working model. Like every single one of them. And the theme of that season was not too tall, not too short, which is awesome. Every person that got eliminated that first day was like a tall working model. Like basically, instead of being hired on this show as contestants, I feel like we were just hired as background models. Like, I really think that when they told me, oh, don't cancel your trip to Japan because you might be back in time, they were telling me, don't cancel your trip to Japan because you're going to be back in time. Like, they had no intention of keeping me on there. That's just how I feel about it. And then I said some things, but I kind of held my shit together. And then when I got back to the van, I finally cried. And, the guy that I had done my runway show with was trying to comfort me. And I was kind of like holding him at a bit of an arm's length because I was like, I don't want you to like think this is anything, but I was like accepting the comfort. And then some of the junior producers were like, sorry that this happened. And I'm like, it's fine. Like, I'm just having a moment. And then Miss J comes up to the buses and says, like, come here, baby, and gives me this big hug, like a painfully tight hug. And it's just like, this is just a show. Look at you. You are a model. I hope you go out there and do great things. Do not let this affect you. They just want to show you're obviously a model. Like, please do not take this personally. And I was like, oh my God, thank you. And after he walked away, the junior producers were just staring at me and they're like, I've never seen him do that before. And I was like, well, just goes to show that like eventually people are going to see the way that this is affecting others and have something to say about it. So anyway, I felt good after that. I still felt shitty, especially the thing about the Japan trip. But I was like, well, Miss J broke character on my behalf. So yay. So then I was sent home post haste. And like, by the way, as I'm down on the bus, like down at the bottom of the hill by this bus, I can hear everyone up on the top of the hill, like cheering, filming, doing their things. So I'm like, this fucking sucks, So anyway, they drive me and the other eliminees to LAX, and I'm like waiting for my flight, and I'm talking on the phone to probably my mom or whoever, and I'm just kind of like candidly talking about it, and I'm like crying, and I can see people kind of staring at me, and I'm like, I don't give a shit. So I get back to Vegas, and I call the client who was going to take me to Japan, and I said, hey, is there any way that you haven't replaced me yet? And they said, sorry, we did. We're leaving next week. We've already booked her ticket and it's happening. And I'm like, okay, F my life, And then I knew my sister and a bunch of my friends were going to Coachella together because my sister had started dating one of my friends who she's still with to this day. Happy 10 years. Then one of the friends last minute couldn't make it and was selling her ticket. So I'm like, I need to go. I need this. Like, for my well-being, I need one thing to go right. So I go to Coachella. To this day, only time I've ever been. Such a fun time. This was 2015. God, I can't even remember who I saw. AC/DC was there. Drake was there, but I think I only saw him barely. Like, so many people. St. Vincent, Marina and the Diamonds, Azalea Banks. Oh, Hozier was there. Anyway, so I'm in the crowd for one of the bigger shows. I don't remember. I'm kind of in the periphery of the field. And I see this tall, beautiful, blonde lady walk by. And I'm like, holy shit, that's Allison. She was on the, like, her own season. And then she was on an all-star season. And she was, like, famous for having really big eyes and, like, posting nosebleed content on Tumblr. Yeah, that girl. Anyway, I see her in the crowd and I run up to her. And you could tell she's like, fuck, And I'm like, hey, are you Allison? And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, I was just on America's Next Top Model and I got sent home like a few days ago on the first episode. And she's just like, fuck him. And I'm like, yeah, fuck him. She's like, okay, have a good time. And I'm like, you too. And it's just funny to me because, like, obviously she has been on the show multiple times. Like, she's really benefited from it. But at the end of the day, it's like, yeah, it's not that deep. So then I went back to work and they had me at the hotel pool. And I was a little bit bummed not to be at the pool club, but honestly, it was really chill. Pretty much no one ever came to this hotel pool. And so I got to just like sit there and doodle story ideas into my notepad. Good times. Anyway, about a month or so after I get eliminated, I see a flyer at my work saying the cast of America's Next Top Model is going to be doing a runway show here at SLS, open to the public. And I said, well, that's fucking weird. But hey, it's open to the public, so I'm going. On the show, I was more like natural, like not a lot of makeup, kind of casual clothes. I show up in a red bandage dress with like smoky eyes and heels, looking bad as fuck. I, start walking into this thing and I'm immediately intercepted by one of the producers. And he's like, oh my God, hey, Raquel. And by this point, like I started a new job. I was on a show. Like I had met so many people in the past couple months that at first I thought he was someone like one of the higher ups at my work. And I'm just like, oh, hey, like, he's like, yeah, let me just go tell them that you're here and maybe they can like put you on the show. Like everyone, he said, oh, when we rolled up in the van, all the contestants were like, ooh, I think Raquel works here. And I was like, okay. He's gone for like 15 minutes and I'm just chilling, waiting. He comes back and he's like, yeah, they're not gonna let you in. And I'm like, well, I thought it was open to everyone. He's like, yeah, but you're not the public anymore. You're part of the show. And it's like a continuity error. And I'm like, okay. So I'm like, you didn't go back there to ask, ooh, let's put Raquel on the show. You went back there to be like, security. Security. So anyway, I got sent home. I was like, fuck. So then I was like looking on the internet to see if anyone was talking about this yet. And it turned out that, there are some people who are very big fans of this show. They were on Reddit. They were on like some reality TV forum that I don't think exists anymore. And they, had seen that little runway show in Hollywood. So they were looking at us and then finding us on social media. Just by seeing me on that show, someone was able to actually find me on Instagram. And then they were posting on Reddit, like, which of these people do you hope makes it in the final cast? And of everyone, I had the least amount of votes. Well, of all the girls, I think I had the least amount of votes. And I was like, wow, that's shitty. Because in my head, I'm like, well, I got eliminated, but everyone who watches it is going to be like, surely that shouldn't have happened. No, they were like, I don't like her. So that was fun. But I tried to kind of just like move on with my life. Anyway, the episode aired, I believe, in August of that same year, August 2015. It was interesting. So out of all of the people that were eliminated that first time, I was the only one with any type of interviewing, like any type of presence really in that episode. Like I was the only one who was being asked questions and they made me look so stupid, which is fine. But like I had all my friends over to watch it and they were like, wow, they did you dirty. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, it's just funny. Like obviously I gave them the content, but they really cut it down to just the parts that made me look a little bit naive. Like the end when I say I'm not conceited, I just think they made a mistake. Like everyone was rolling laughing. They're like, no. I'm like, god damn it. And even like years later my friend was watching it with her husband and she saw that part and she's like, this is iconic, and like sent me a picture and he was like, no, don't send that, that's mean. And I'm like, the fact that he thought it was mean just shows how stupid of a thing it was for me to say. But like, the context, baby. It's all about the context. Afterwards, I was looking up news articles online and it's funny, like a bunch of them mentioned me. I'm like, of course, because I was like the token eliminee in the episode. Like no one else was really featured. Yeah, someone's like, Raquel took her Harry Potter wand and made herself disappear. I'm like, okay, that's very clever. I thought I was out of range of the cameras when I finally broke down crying. and there weren't any camera people around for like 200 feet. So that part where I'm crying and I'm like holding the other guy at an arm's length, that was filmed from like a sniper rifle distance away. That's crazy. Like, that's actually so fucked up. Like, someone was really like, oh yeah, now she's finally crying. Zoom. So then one of the articles said, don't worry, Tyra will bottle your tears and market them as her next perfume. That was really funny. You know, most of them were like making fun of, or some ones like, you know, Raquel says she's auditioned 5 times and is gonna make it in because she's 5'11". Like, okay, sweetie. And I'm like, yeah, fair enough. And then one of them, the woman writing the article was like, this model named Raquel says, like, I just feel like something went wrong. She's 5'11" and looks like a young Brooke Shields, by the way. So none of this makes sense. And I was like, wow, like, first of all, I don't look like a young Brooke Shields even slightly, but like, I will take the fucking compliment when so few have been dished out. And then of course I had to troll the reality forums, and it was all these like, it was, I would say it was kind of polarizing. Like, a lot of people were like, oh yeah, Raquel's one of my faves. And then the rest were like, she looks like a shark. She looks like a fish. Like, what did they say? Like, she has a good body, but her face sucks, or like is boring. All this stuff, and like, I'm not gonna lie, it gave me a complex. Like, it definitely made me feel like I had to, like, you know, prove something, which I guess worked out well for me, but it definitely did not make me feel good about myself. But it was also kind of like, okay, well, if that's the worst thing people have to say about me is that I'm like boring looking or that I look like a fish, then okay, I already knew I looked like a fish. I didn't know I looked boring though. I feel like that's worse. But anyway, you know, then there were a lot of people who said good things, but like, I think it's human nature to not latch onto them. So like, of course I'm going to watch the rest of the season, because at this point I know everyone on it. Like, every single person I talked to at least once. So yeah, I had to watch it, you know. It was weird, like, knowing everyone on the show. So anyway, I'm watching it, and towards the end, every previous cycle they've gone to an international location when it's down to like a few people. But I guess there must have been a budget cut, because they decided to go to Las Vegas. And while they're in Las Vegas, they stay at the SLS. It's all coming together. And while they're at the SLS, they're like, we're going to do a photo shoot in a pool. And remember how I told you there were 2 pools? There was a pool club, and there's also a hotel pool that I worked at. Well, coincidence of all coincidences, they did their photo shoot in the hotel pool that I worked at. Like, is that weird to you? That these people put me on the show, knew where I worked, kicked me off the show, and then made my workplace their big destination? Like, it's just weird. I don't know. Maybe it was just a coincidence, but it's weird. It's like, oh, did I help you come up with that idea? And you know, like, did you reward me by like telling me to kick rocks? There's just too much synchronicity, and not in a good way. I did keep in touch with, you know, some of the other people on IG. There were other people from past seasons of ANTM who started following me, became mutuals. It made me realize, like, not everyone hated me, you know, like, not everyone was like, ew, why is this person here? Because of course it feels like that in the moment. So then at the end of 2015, I had the option to compete in a contest. And like, I would just like to say, my modeling career has been full of contests. The way I got into the door with modeling was a contest. Obviously, America's Next Top Model was a contest. And then the way I moved to New York was also a contest. And that's very abnormal, especially for it to be so many. To even have one thing with modeling be a contest, I feel like is abnormal. So yeah, I'm definitely going to make another podcast about how to get into modeling, and entering a contest is like not the normal way to do it. Like, when I told the judges at this contest that I had been on America's Next Top Model, they, I guess, were afraid I'd be like too full of myself, and so they gave me 3rd place. But apparently that was good enough to move to New York. So they invited me out, and I moved into a model house, which I'll definitely talk about later. During 2016, like that year I was there, I had a casting with Kelly Catrone, and I was like, oh, this is so exciting because she likes me. And I didn't get picked. Oh, and another thing is my model manager, my agents, everyone were like, do not talk about America's Next Top Model in New York. Don't let anyone know you were on that, because it was considered radioactive in the industry, which is wild. So, I continued to occasionally Google myself because it really hadn't been that long. And after my first New York Fashion Week with an agent, so like my, bigger shows, I found that my Fashion Week photos were actually circulating around a forum where a bunch of people were saying I was only a model because of my body and that my face was like nothing special and that like I wouldn't make it very far. Yay! So anyway, my mom loves to tell people I was on America's Next Top Model. It's like a big fun fact of hers for years. But I don't really like to tell anyone unless it comes up. Like people are like, oh, did you ever watch that show? And I'm like, yeah. And I was also on it. So then 2020 happens, shut down, everyone's home, everyone's watching TV, right? I can't tell you how many shows I binged during that time. And I think ANTM had just like come out on Prime or something. So a bunch of people were watching it. And I would get a bunch of DMs from people being like, whoa, wait, you were on this? Because at this point, it's been like 5 years. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I was. Jump to about 2023, and I'm going through this kind of tumultuous period in my life. And I read this book called You Are a Badass and another one called You Are a Badass at Making Money, both by the same author. And I said, you know what? I'm going to jump back into modeling. Like, I've always loved it. Like, let's go. And apparently at some point in the past, I had signed up for emails from something called Model Tribe. I didn't even remember subscribing to it because, if you've ever been depressed, you know that like you don't remember everything. So the day after finishing this book, You Are a Badass at Making Money, I get an email about a Model Tribe spiritual retreat and model mentorship opportunity in Joshua Tree, California. And at this point, I was living in New York, didn't have a lot of money, but I was like, this really sounds like something I need to do. And I looked up the owner and I was like, Sharon Brown, that sounds kind of familiar. And I realized, oh, she is an ANTM alum. I was like, well, that's a weird coincidence. So I email her, I tell her a little bit about myself and my story, and she immediately reaches out and invites me to come on this retreat. So I'll definitely talk about that in another email. Sharon has her own podcast. We'll probably be on each other's at some point, but it really opened my eyes and inspired me to kind of like just take control of my life. That whole retreat, it was only 5 days, but it like changed my life. Now Sharon and the Model Tribe are like a huge part of my life. All the girls that were there, she handpicked to be there, and it was just the perfect alchemy of people. So yeah, that is like a huge thing that the show has given me. I mean, I still might have found her without it, but obviously that is like a weird connection that we already had. Flash forward to a few months ago, I met some new friends at my neighborhood bar, and apparently one of them recognized me on site from the show. And then, recently we were talking about it and they were like, oh yeah, by the way, I recognized you. So I'm like, you know what? I feel like it's, this weird thing that I did when I was younger and like I don't talk about it. But the more time passes, the more I realize like, that was a cool experience. And, yeah, there were some people who didn't like me. That's kind of life. And there were a lot of people who did, or who at least like thought what I was doing was interesting. And, if we're just so worried about being cringe or being embarrassing, then we're never going to get anything done. So it's why I decided to talk about this. It's just funny. It's an interesting part of my lore. The only thing I am still mad about is that I haven't been to Japan yet. I didn't get that job. I didn't get to model there. I did work with those clients again in LA and in Vegas, but yeah, they were like, we're not going to bet on you for Japan anymore. And I get that, but it's so unfortunate. So if you're listening to this podcast in the year, like, I don't know, 2027, and there's no Japan episode, it means something has gone seriously wrong, because that is a trip that needs to happen in the next 2 years. I really hope you enjoyed that story. It's just my version of events, so please take it with a giant grain of salt, but that is how I remember it. I'd like to give a big shout out to the sponsor of today's episode, Fairy Circle Fiber Arts. If you haven't finished Christmas shopping for that special someone, first of all, you're crazy, and second of all, you're just like me. Give them the gift of fiber, and I'm not talking about your diet. Patterns are available on Etsy and Ravelry, and they can be found on Instagram at fairycircle.fiberarts. Thank you for listening. Please hit that follow or subscribe button, and I'll see you next Tuesday.